They thought he was just another poor farmer they could humiliate. The fancy restaurant staff laughed as they kicked him out, making sure everyone saw how they treated people in muddy boots and worn clothes. They didn't know James Cooper had just become a millionaire that morning when oil was discovered on his struggling farm. As they mocked him, he made a decision. He would buy this exact restaurant, not for business, but for revenge. The next day, he walked in as the new owner, holding the deed in his calloused hands. Now he had the power to fire every single person who had humiliated him. But what these arrogant servers didn't expect was how he would teach them the most expensive lesson about judging others. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over Cooper Farm like it had for 3 generations, painting the weathered barn in shades of amber and gold. James Cooper stood in his kitchen, calloused hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug that had been his father's before him. Through the window, he could see the struggling corn crops, their leaves turning yellow weeks too early. The drought had been merciless this year. On the kitchen wall hung the original farm deed, protected behind glass that had seen better days. His grandfather's signature was still visible at the bottom, the ink faded but legible. Theodore Cooper, 1947. Next to it, a more recent addition, his daughter Amy's acceptance letter to the State Agricultural College. The contrast between the old and new told the story of their family's journey, of pride and perseverance against increasingly difficult odds. James took another sip of coffee, wincing at its bitterness. The cheap grounds were just another reminder of how tight things had become. But today was different. Today, Amy was graduating, and he'd promised her dinner at Le Maison Rouge, that fancy place in town she'd always dreamed about visiting. He reached into his pocket, feeling the worn edges of his checkbook. The balance was just enough for dinner, if they were careful. The rest would have to wait. The repair bill for the tractor, the mortgage payment, the new seeds they desperately needed for next season. But watching Amy walk across that stage in her cap and gown would make it all worthwhile. "Morning, Dad," Amy's voice carried from the hallway, full of the energy that only youth and optimism could provide. She appeared in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and a work shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 22, she was the spitting image of her mother, Sarah, who'd passed away 5 years ago. "Morning, sweetheart. Ready for the big day?" "Just a few chores to finish first." She grabbed an apple from the bowl on the counter, one of the few that hadn't bruised. "The irrigation system's acting up again in the south field." James nodded, guilt gnawing at his stomach. The irrigation system had been failing for months, but there was never enough money to properly fix it. "I'll take a look after I check." On the Miller contract, their last hope for a decent harvest this year. The neighboring farm had agreed to let them use their equipment in exchange for a share of the crops. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than watching everything wither in the fields. Amy paused by the deed on the wall, touching the glass lightly. "We'll make it work, Dad. We always do." James watched his daughter head out to face another day of hard work, her head held high despite everything. She'd grown up too fast after Sarah died, shouldering responsibilities no teenager should have to bear. Even now, on her graduation day, she put the farm first. The morning passed in a blur of familiar tasks. James checked the irrigation, patched what he could with spare parts, and tried not to think about how each repair was just another temporary fix. By noon, the sun was high and merciless, baking the earth until it cracked. In his office, really just a corner of the living room with a desk, James opened the farm's ledger. The numbers hadn't changed since yesterday, but he checked them again anyway. Red ink filled most of the pages, telling a story of declining yields and rising costs. Next to the ledger sat a stack of bank notices, each one a little more urgent than the last. But today wasn't about bills or broken equipment or failing crops. Today was about Amy, about celebrating her achievement despite every obstacle life had thrown their way. She'd worked so hard, maintaining top grades while helping on the farm, earning scholarships when they couldn't afford tuition. She deserved. This dinner deserved to sit in that fancy restaurant and be treated like the amazing young woman she'd become. James stood up, his joints protesting after hours of physical labor. He had just enough time to clean up before they needed to leave for the graduation ceremony. As he passed the farm deed on his way to shower, he paused, touching the glass just as Amy had done that morning. "What would you think of us now, Dad?" he whispered to the memory of his father. Still holding on, still fighting, but for how? Much longer? The answer, though he didn't know it yet, would come sooner than he expected, changing everything in ways he could never have imagined. The black SUVs seemed out of place on the dusty farm road, their polished surfaces reflecting the morning sun. James watched them approach from his position by the failed irrigation pump, wondering if they were bank representatives coming to deliver more bad news. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving streaks of grease and dirt, and walked to meet them. 3 men in expensive suits emerged from the vehicles, looking comically pristine against the backdrop of the weathered barn. The leader, a silver-haired man with sharp features, extended his hand. "Mr. Cooper, I'm Richard Maxwell from Starlight Oil. We've been conducting geological surveys in the area, and we'd like to discuss something rather important with you." James shook the offered hand, noting the contrast between his calloused palm and Maxwell's smooth grip. "Might want to watch. The shoes," he warned, gesturing to the muddy ground. "Been trying to fix a leak in the irrigation system." Maxwell smiled, seemingly unbothered by the dirt now speckling his Italian leather shoes. "Actually, Mr. Cooper, what we've discovered might make irrigation problems a thing of the past for you." Inside the kitchen, Amy poured coffee for their unexpected guests, using the good cups they usually saved for holidays. She caught her father's eye, raising an eyebrow in silent question. James gave a slight shrug in response. Maxwell spread several maps across the kitchen table, pointing to various colored markings that meant nothing to James. "We've detected a significant oil deposit underneath your property, Mr. Cooper. Initial surveys suggest it's one of the largest finds in the region." James sat heavily in his chair, the words not quite registering. "Oil? Here?" "Yes, and we're prepared to make you an extremely generous offer for the mineral rights." Maxwell pulled out a contract, thick with legal language. "We're talking about an immediate payment of $5 million, plus ongoing royalties from production." The number hung in the air like smoke, impossible and tantalizing. Amy dropped the coffee pot, barely missing Maxwell's pristine suit. The clatter seemed to break some sort of spell, and suddenly everyone was moving. Amy cleaning up the spill, one of Maxwell's associates helping her, while the third man pulled out more documents. "This can't be real," James muttered, but Maxwell was already laying out more papers. "I assure you, Mr. Cooper, it's very real. We've been quietly buying up mineral rights in this area for months. Your property sits at the heart of the deposit. We're prepared to begin preliminary work as soon as you sign." James looked at the contract, then at Amy, who had stopped cleaning to stare at him with wide eyes. "I need to have my lawyer look this over." Maxwell nodded approvingly. "Of course, we wouldn't expect anything less, but I can assure you this is our best offer. We're prepared to handle all environmental concerns, minimize impact on your farming operations, and provide significant compensation for any disruption." James's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the contract. The amount listed made his eyes blur. It was more money than 3 generations of Coopers had made farming this land combined. "Dad," Amy said softly, "this could change everything." And it would, but not in the way any of them expected. As James asked Maxwell to leave the contract for review, as he watched the black SUVs disappear down the dusty road, as he called his lawyer with shaking hands, he had no idea that by evening this miracle would become the catalyst for something entirely different. "Don't tell anyone about this yet," he told Amy, who was still staring at the contract on the table. "Not until we're sure it's real. Not until after your graduation." She nodded, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mom would have been so happy, she whispered. James pulled her into a hug, feeling the weight of years of struggle begin to lift. We'll still have dinner at La Maison Rouge tonight, he decided. But let's keep wearing our work clothes. No sense in letting anyone know things have changed just yet. It was a decision that would prove fateful, keeping his weathered appearance, hiding his newfound wealth behind mud-stained jeans and worn boots. A decision that would lead to humiliation, and then to something more powerful, the opportunity for justice. As he folded the contract and tucked it into his pocket, James had no idea that in less than 24 hours he would own not just a prosperous farm, but also the very restaurant that would dare to judge him by his appearance. The oil contract in his pocket was more than just a piece of paper. It was a key that would unlock not only wealth, but the chance to teach an unforgettable lesson about dignity and respect. La Maison Rouge stood like a beacon of affluence in the heart of town, its red brick facade illuminated by tasteful copper sconces. James and Amy Cooper climbed the pristine stone steps, their work boots leaving faint dusty impressions that made the doorman's lip curl slightly. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegant table settings. The maitre d' Antoine looked up from his leather-bound reservation book, his practiced smile faltering as he took in their appearance. James wore his cleanest work shirt and jeans, Amy a simple sundress she'd saved for special occasions. "Do you have a reservation?" Antoine's French accent dripped with barely concealed disdain. "Yes, Cooper for two." James stood straight, conscious of the oil contract still in his pocket. "It's my daughter's graduation dinner." Antoine's eyes flicked between them, lingering on James's mud-stained boots. "One moment, please." He disappeared into the dining room, where he engaged in a whispered conversation with a man in an expensive suit, Gerard Laurent, the owner. Laurent approached them, hands clasped behind his back. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake with your reservation. We are fully committed this evening." "But I called weeks ago," James protested, feeling Amy tense beside him. "I confirmed yesterday." "Perhaps you would be more comfortable at the diner on 5th Street, Laurent suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Their dress code is more accommodating." A well-dressed couple brushed past them, the woman's diamonds catching the light. Laurent immediately brightened. "Ah, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, your usual table is ready." James felt his face burn as other diners began to stare. A young server nearby snickered, whispering to her colleague, "Can you believe they thought they could eat here? In those clothes?" "Dad," Amy whispered, tugging at his sleeve, "let's just go." But James couldn't move. The contract in his pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. He could buy this entire restaurant 10 times over. Now, but these people were judging him, humiliating him and his daughter on what should have been her proudest day. "Is there a problem here?" Laurent asked, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Yes, there is," James started, but another server interrupted, loudly enough for nearby diners to hear. "Sir, this is a fine dining establishment. We have standards to maintain. Perhaps you didn't notice the dress code posted outside." More whispers, more stares. Amy's eyes filled with tears as a group of young professionals at the bar openly pointed and laughed. "These people," one woman stage whispered, "they really don't know their place, do they?" Laurent stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "I suggest you leave now, before we're forced to call security. We can't have you disturbing our actual customers." James felt something snap inside him. Not just anger, but a cold, calculated determination. He reached for the contract in his pocket, ready to show them exactly who they were dealing with. But Amy's quiet sob stopped him. "Please, Dad, can we just go?" He looked at his daughter's face, saw the humiliation burning in her eyes, and made a different decision. Without a word, he turned and led her out, past the smirking staff, past the judgmental stares, down the pristine steps they'd climbed with such hope minutes before. In the car, Amy broke down. "I just wanted one nice dinner, one special thing. That wasn't about the farm or struggling or making do. James started the engine, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The restaurant's warm lights mocked them through the windshield. He could see Laurent and his staff laughing through the front windows, probably sharing their amusement at the poor farmers who dared to rise above their station. "Amy," he said quietly, "I promise you something. This isn't over." "Dad, please, just forget it." "No." He pulled out his phone, finding the business card Maxwell had left that morning. Some things need to be made right. As they drove away, James was already forming a plan. He had Laurent's smug face burned into his memory, along with every smirk, every whisper, every moment of humiliation. He had millions in his grasp, and decades of business sense earned through hard work and determination. But most importantly, he had something these people had never expected from a simple farmer: the power to teach them exactly how wrong they were. "We'll get dinner at home," he told Amy, his voice steady now. "And tomorrow things are going to change around here." The oil contract sat heavy in his pocket, but another piece of paper would soon join it, one that would wipe those superior smiles off their faces forever. The deed to Le Maison Rouge itself. James sat in his lawyer's office early the next morning, the oil contract now signed and official on the desk between them. Tom Wilson had been the Cooper family's lawyer for 20 years, handling everything from water rights disputes to Sarah's will. Now he watched with concern as his old friend laid out an unusual request. "You want me to find out everything about Le Maison Rouge, the restaurant that just threw you out?" Tom leaned back in his chair, frowning. "James, I know you're hurt, but I want to buy it." James's voice was calm, measured, "and I need to know exactly how to make that happen." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Buy it? James, that's not a tractor we're talking about. Fine dining establishments in prime locations are struggling right now," James finished. "I did some research last night. 3 similar restaurants in the county have closed this year. The economy's hitting luxury businesses hard." Tom pulled up his computer database, typing quickly. Le Maison Rouge. Owned by Gerard Laurent, French. National, been here 15 years. He paused, scanning the screen. Well, you might be onto something. They've had 3 tax liens in the past 2 years. James leaned forward. "Show me." The financial records painted a clear picture. Behind its glamorous facade, Le Maison Rouge was drowning in debt. Laurent had overextended himself trying to maintain an image of exclusivity, taking out high interest, loans to renovate the wine cellar and update the kitchen. The pandemic had hit them hard, and recovery had been slower than expected. "He's leveraged to the hilt," Tom explained, scrolling through pages of financial data. "Operating costs are through the roof, and their customer base is shrinking. People aren't spending like they used to on fine dining." James studied the numbers, years of running a struggling farm, having taught him to read between the lines of financial statements. "He's desperate, isn't he?" "Probably, but he won't admit it easily. These types never do." James stood, walking to the window. Outside, the town was coming to life. Morning traffic moving past the lawyer's office. Le Maison Rouge was just visible. In the distance, its red brick catching the early sunlight. "Make him an offer," James said finally, "through a holding company. Don't let him know it's me." Tom was already reaching for his phone. "How much?" "Start at market value. But make it clear we can close immediately, cash deal. No contingencies." James turned back from the window, his expression hardened by purpose. "And Tom, make sure the deal includes retention of all current staff contracts. I want the power to decide who stays and who goes." As Tom made the initial calls, James reviewed Laurent's personal financial statement. The man's lifestyle was as overextended as his business. Luxury cars, a vacation home in the south of France, private school tuition for his children, all built on a foundation of debt and appearances. "He'll bite," James said quietly, more to himself than Tom. Men like that always do. They care more about looking successful than being successful. By noon, they had their answer. Laurent was interested but playing hard to get, claiming other potential buyers. James recognized the negotiation tactic. He'd used it himself with grain buyers over the years. "Tell him he has 24 hours to decide," James instructed. "After that, we'll look at other properties in the area." He paused, a slight smile crossing his face, and mentioned that we've heard the Italian place on 3rd Street might be interested in selling. Tom grinned, understanding the strategy. Create a little pressure. People like Laurent need to feel they're in control, even when they're drowning. Give him the illusion of choice, but make sure he knows time is running out. As they finalized the paperwork for the holding company, James thought about Amy, about her tears the night before. She was back at the farm today, probably tending to the animals, having no idea what her father was setting in motion. "One more thing," James added, pulling out his checkbook. "I want you to start quiet inquiries about experienced restaurant staff in the area, people with good references who might be looking for work. We're going to need replacements." Tom paused in his typing. "You're really going to clean house?" James looked down at his work-worn hands, remembering every sneer, every whisper, every moment of humiliation from the night before. They judged us without knowing anything about us, Tom. Treated us like we were nothing because of how we looked. He met his lawyer's eyes. Now they're going to learn what it feels like to be judged and found wanting. The personnel files spread across James's kitchen table told their own story. 23 employees, from Laurent himself down to the newest dishwasher. Tom's investigator had been thorough, providing work histories, performance reviews, and even social media activity for each staff member. Antoine Delacroix, the maître d' who had first sneered at James and Amy, had a history of customer complaints at his previous restaurants, all carefully buried by Laurent, who valued his discriminating approach to customer selection. The head chef had 3 pending wage disputes with former kitchen staff. The bartender regularly overcharged tourists while giving free drinks to local elite. "It's quite a collection of characters," Tom said, sorting through the files. "But here's something interesting. There's a group of newer employees, mostly support staff, with excellent reviews from customers, but frequent conflicts with management." James picked up the file of a young waitress, Maria Rodriguez. Her performance reviews showed high ratings for service, but numerous warnings about not understanding the restaurant's standards, code for not participating in the discrimination against less wealthy-looking customers. "These are the ones we keep," James decided, setting Maria's file aside. He found similar patterns. A dishwasher who'd defended a homeless man being harassed by Laurent, a sous chef who'd been reprimanded for serving inappropriate customers at the bar. The front door opened, and Amy walked in from her morning farm. "Work." She stopped short at the sight of all the papers. "Dad, what's all this?" James hesitated. He hadn't told her about his plans, wanting to protect her from the stress of it all. But looking at her now, still holding her head high despite the previous night's humiliation, he knew she deserved to know. "Sit down, sweetheart. There's something we need to discuss." As he explained his plan, Amy's eyes widened. "You're really going to buy it, the whole restaurant?" "Already in progress," Tom confirmed. "Final paperwork should be ready tomorrow morning." Amy picked up one of the personnel files, reading quietly. Antoine Delacroix. 3 previous restaurants, all with discrimination complaints. She looked up at her father. "You're not just buying it, are you? You're going to change everything." James nodded. "But I need to know you're okay with this. It's your graduation money too, in a way." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "Remember what Mum used to say? Money doesn't make you better than anyone. It just gives you the chance to show who you really are." James felt his throat tighten at the memory. Sarah had always been the moral compass of their family, teaching Amy and reminding him about the importance of treating everyone with dignity. "We'll do it right," he promised. "Not just for revenge, but to make something better. A place where everyone's welcome, as long as they treat others with respect." Tom gathered up the files of the employees they planned to keep. 6 out of 23 I've already started contacting potential replacements. Word's gotten around about Laurent's management style, and there are a lot of good people in the industry looking for a better workplace. James looked at the discarded files of those who would be let go. Antoine, Laurent, the servers who had laughed, the bartender who had pointed. Each one had made a choice about how to treat others. Tomorrow they would face the consequences of those choices. "Have the new staff ready," he instructed Tom. "I want them there before we make the announcement, and make sure security is in place. Some of these people won't take it well." Amy picked up Antoine's file again, her expression hardening as she read more details. They really thought they could treat people this way forever, didn't they? That there would never be any consequences. James put his arm around her shoulders. "That's usually how it works with people like that. They forget that circumstances can change in an instant." He looked down at his work-worn hands. "Sometimes it takes a farmer to teach city folks about reaping what you sow." The signing was scheduled for 3 p.m. in Tom's office. James arrived early, still in his work clothes, and watched through the window as Gerard Laurent's Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. The restaurant owner stepped out in an impeccably tailored suit, straightening his tie as if preparing for battle. "Remember," Tom murmured, "he still doesn't know it's you. The holding company paperwork is airtight." James nodded, moving to sit in a chair partially hidden by a large potted plant. He wanted to witness this moment, to see Laurent's face, but not to reveal himself. Not yet. Laurent swept into the office, greeting Tom with practiced charm. "I trust everything is in order? My lawyer has reviewed the documents." "Of course." Tom gestured to the conference room. "Right this way." James watched through the glass partition as Laurent settled into a leather chair, spreading the papers before him like a monarch reviewing treaties. The man's manicured hands moved efficiently through the documents, signing with flourishes that spoke of someone accustomed to wielding power. "The full amount will be transferred immediately upon signing," Tom explained, his tone professional. "As discussed, you'll have 48 hours to remove any personal items from the office, but operational control transfers immediately." Laurent paused, pen hovering over the final signature line. "And the new owner? Will they be joining us?" "They prefer to remain anonymous for now." Tom's poker face was perfect. "Business privacy, you understand." Laurent's smile was thin. "Of course, though I must admit I'm curious about who would pay such a premium for immediate closure." He signed the last page with a dramatic flourish. "I do hope they understand the unique challenges of maintaining a certain standard of clientele." James felt his jaw tighten at the implied snobbery, but kept silent. The moment wasn't quite right. "I'm sure the new owner has very specific plans for the establishment," Tom replied diplomatically, gathering the signed documents. As Tom processed the paperwork, Laurent stood adjusting his cuffs. "Well, I suppose I should inform the staff, though between us," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "they're hardly worth keeping, especially that little group that keeps serving the wrong sort of people, no understanding of proper standards at all." James had heard enough. He stood, stepping out from behind the plant. "Actually, I'll be handling the staff notifications personally." The color drained from Laurent's face. You're the buyer." "Surprised?" James moved closer, enjoying the way Laurent instinctively stepped back. "Guess I clean up okay for a simple farmer." Laurent's shock transformed into fury. "This is a joke. This can't be legal. I never would have signed if you'd known it was the man you threw out of your restaurant last night." James picked up the newly signed deed. "Funny how things work out, isn't it?" "I'll sue," Laurent sputtered. You'll what?" Tom interrupted smoothly. "The sale is completely legal. The documents are signed. And given your restaurant's financial situation, I doubt you want your books examined too closely by the courts." Laurent's shoulders sagged as the reality of his situation sank in. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to teach you and your staff something about judging people," James said quietly. "Starting tomorrow morning." "The staff has contracts," Laurent tried, grasping at straws. "You can't just fire them?" James smiled. "Actually, I can. Those contracts you're so worried about, They all have morality clauses. And I have documented evidence of discrimination against customers. Want to guess how that plays out legally? Laurent stared at him, finally seeing not a dirty farmer, but a businessman who had outmaneuvered him completely. Without another word, he turned and fled the office, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and defeat. James held the deed in his hands, feeling the weight of it. This piece of paper represented more than ownership. It was justice, wrapped in legal letterhead and official seals. "You know," Tom said, watching Laurent's Mercedes peel out of the parking lot, "I don't think I've ever enjoyed a closing quite this much." James carefully folded the deed and placed it in his pocket, right next to the oil contract that had made it all possible. "The closing's just the beginning, Tom. Tomorrow morning, we serve justice à la carte." Through the window, he could see La Maison Rouge in the distance, its red brick walls glowing in the late afternoon sun. In less than 24 hours, those walls would witness a very different kind of service, one where respect wasn't determined by the price of your clothes or the mud on your boots, but by the content of your character. Dawn was just breaking when James pulled into La Maison Rouge's private parking lot, the keys to the restaurant heavy in his pocket. Each key had been meticulously labeled by Laurent's assistant: front door, wine cellar, office, storage rooms. A complete set that represented total control of the establishment. 2 security guards from a private firm Tom had hired were already waiting, their presence subtle but unmistakable. Behind them, a group of new employees stood quietly, carefully selected replacements for those who would soon be leaving. "Everything ready?" James asked the head of security, a former military man named Mike. "Yes, sir. We've secured all exits and have the premises under surveillance. No one enters without your approval." James nodded, then turned to the new staff. They were a diverse group, chosen not just for their experience, but for their proven track records of treating all customers with respect. The new head chef had worked at a successful farm-to-table restaurant in Seattle. The new maitre d' came, highly recommended for her ability to make every guest feel special, regardless of their appearance or status. "Thank you all for coming early," James addressed them. "I know this situation is unusual, but I promise you're part of something important, something that's going to change how this place treats people." He inserted the first key into the front. Dr. Locke, remembering how he'd stood here just 2 days ago, full of hope for his daughter's graduation dinner. The lock turned with a solid click that echoed in the quiet morning air. Inside, the restaurant was dark and silent, the expensive furnishings casting long shadows in the dim light. James moved through the space, switching on lights, each illumination, revealing another aspect of the luxury that had been used to justify discrimination. The new chef, Maria, whistled softly as she inspected the kitchen. "This equipment is top of the line. Shame it was used in service of such ugly behavior." "Not anymore," James replied, using another key to open the wine cellar. "From now on, every part of this place will be about welcoming people, not excluding them." The security team took their positions as James unlocked the office. Laurent's personal items were still there: expensive fountain pens, a framed Michelin review, photos of him with celebrity guests. James started clearing the desk, preparing for the confrontation to come. "First staff arrives at 7:30, Mike reported, checking his watch. "Usually the prep cooks and cleaning crew." James held up the key to the employee entrance. "Let them in as normal, but no one leaves once they're inside. I want everyone here for the announcement." He could feel the weight of each key in his pocket, each one representing a different aspect of the power that had been used to humiliate him and countless others. Now, these same keys would help him reshape that power into something better. The new staff began their preparations, moving with the quiet efficiency of experienced professionals. In the kitchen, Maria was already planning menu changes, incorporating local ingredients, including some that would come from Cooper Farm. At the host station, the new maitre d' was reviewing reservation policies, eliminating the coded language that had been used to discriminate against undesirable guests. Amy arrived just before 7, carrying a box of fresh pastries for the new team. She paused in the doorway, taking in the transformed space. "It looks different somehow," she said, setting down the box. "Even though nothing's really changed yet." James understood what she meant. The physical space was the same, but the atmosphere had shifted. The air itself seemed lighter, clearer, no longer heavy with pretension and prejudice. "Ready?" she asked, squeezing his arm. He fingered the keys in his pocket one last time, feeling the ridges and grooves that would unlock more than just doors. These keys would open the way to justice, to dignity, to a new chapter in both their lives. "More than ready," he replied, hearing the first of the original staff arriving at the employee entrance. "Time to show them what real class looks like." The security cameras captured every moment of what would later become known as the Morning of Change at La Maison Rouge. Each screen in the office showed a different angle as the original staff filtered in, unaware of their new reality. The kitchen, prep cooks, found unfamiliar faces waiting. The wine cellar camera showed the sommelier discovering his codes had been changed. At the host station, Antoine arrived to find his podium occupied by someone else. Confusion turned to concern as security guards quietly blocked the exits. "What's going on?" Antoine demanded, his accent thickening with stress. "Where is Mr. Laurent?" James watched the monitors, timing his entrance. The kitchen staff had huddled together, whispering anxiously. The servers who had laughed at him and Amy were gathering near the bar, shooting suspicious glances at the new faces. Every reaction, every whispered conversation, every nervous glance was being recorded, evidence of the moment justice arrived wearing work boots and a farmer's weathered face. "Ready?" Mike asked through the security radio. James straightened his simple work shirt. "Send them to the main dining room." The security team began herding the confused staff toward the center of the restaurant. The cameras caught their expressions as they realized something significant was happening. The bartender who had mocked James tried to leave, but was politely yet firmly redirected by a guard. "Ladies and gentlemen," James's voice carried across the restaurant as he emerged from the office. "I believe some introductions are in order." The cameras captured the exact moment of recognition. Antoine's face drained of color. The servers who had laughed stopped mid-whisper. The bartender took an involuntary step back. "You?" Antoine's voice cracked. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning is simple." James moved to the center of the room, aware of Amy watching proudly from near the kitchen. "As of yesterday afternoon, I own La Maison Rouge." The security footage showed the ripple of shock that passed through the group. A young server burst into tears. The sous-chef swore in French. "This is impossible," Antoine sputtered. "Mr. Laurent would never—" "Mr. Laurent didn't know it was me until after he signed the papers," James interrupted. "Just like you didn't know who I was when you decided I wasn't good enough to eat here." He gestured to the new staff members positioned around the room. "Let me introduce you to your replacements." The cameras caught every flinch, every widened eye, every moment of dawning comprehension. "You can't fire us," the head server protested. "We have contracts." "Actually, I can." James held up a thick folder. "These are copies of your personnel, e-files, the documented incidents of discrimination, the customer complaints you thought were buried, the selective service policies you've been enforcing. Would you like me to continue?" Silence fell. On the security monitors, James could see some staff members looking at their shoes, others glancing guiltily at colleagues who had warned them about their behavior. "However," James continued, "I believe in second chances. Just like I believe people deserve to be judged by their character, not their clothes." He nodded to Tom, who began distributing envelopes. "In these you'll find two things. First, your final paycheck, including legally required severance. Second, a letter of recommendation, blank. What I write on it depends on what you do next." The cameras showed trembling hands opening envelopes, faces registering surprise at the generous severance amounts. Those of you who accept responsibility for your actions, who genuinely want to learn from this experience, come see me in my office this afternoon. Prove to me you've learned something about judging others, and I'll help you find new positions. Show me you can change, and I'll make sure that blank letter helps you start fresh. He turned to Antoine, who stood rigid with shock. Starting with you, Mr. Delacroix, remember what you said about people like us not belonging here? Care to revise that opinion? The maitre d' opened and closed his mouth, no words emerging. The security footage would later show tears forming in his eyes. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings, James announced. Security will escort you to your lockers. After that, anyone without a new contract will be considered trespassing. As the stunned staff began to move, James raised his voice one final time. One more thing. Tonight, we're hosting a special dinner. My daughter's graduation celebration, the one you all thought we weren't good enough for. You're all invited as guests. Show up, dress however you want, and experience what it feels like to be judged only by how you treat others. The cameras captured the final moments of the old regime. Antoine slumped against the host station, the proud sommelier quietly removing his name tag, the servers who had laughed now wiping away tears. But they also showed something else. A few staff members approaching James, heads bowed, ready to learn, to change, to understand. Amy touched her father's arm. Think any of them will come tonight? James watched the monitors as the last of the original staff was escorted out. Those who do will be the ones worth giving a second chance. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment. It's teaching people to be better. The Valley Times headline read, "Local farmer buys elite restaurant, fires staff over discrimination." Below it, a photo showed James standing in front of La Maison Rouge, his work boots and simple clothes now a statement rather than a source of shame. The story had exploded across social media within hours of the mass firing, with locals sharing their own experiences of discrimination at the restaurant. I never thought I'd see the day, Mrs. Chen from the local alterations shop told reporters. That place turned me away last year when I tried to celebrate my 70th birthday there. Said they were fully booked, even though I could see empty tables through the window. James sat in his new office, reading through the growing pile of messages and emails. Some were from former customers sharing similar stories. Others were from restaurant industry professionals, either condemning or praising his actions. The most interesting ones were from the fired staff members. Antoine's email was particularly revealing. I understand now what we did was wrong. The way you treated us today, with more respect than we showed you, made me realize how far I had strayed from my original passion for hospitality. If the offer for a recommendation still stands, I would like to meet. The phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning. Local TV stations wanted interviews. Restaurant critics were trying to book tables. Even a few national news outlets had called, seeing in the story a broader narrative about class, dignity, and justice. Amy brought in another stack of messages. Dad, you need to see these. They're from other restaurant owners in town. Apparently, Laurent and his staff weren't just discriminating here. They were encouraging other high-end places to do the same. James picked up one letter, written on expensive stationery from the Grand Plaza Hotel. They're worried we'll expose their practices too. He smiled slightly. Maybe they should be. The newspaper article had quoted several local business leaders, their carefully worded statements revealing the crack in the facade of the town's elite dining scene. We maintain high standards, one owner had said, only to have the reporter dig up dozens of similar discrimination complaints against his establishment. Outside the office window, a small crowd had gathered. Not protesters, as some had predicted, but ordinary people. Farmers, shop workers, teachers, all wanting to see the place that had become a symbol of change. Some were taking selfies in front of the building, proudly wearing their work clothes. The lunch service starts in an hour, Amy reminded him. Maria's new menu is ready. Simple, honest food at fair prices. She's even naming a dish after you. The farmer's special, James laughed. Let's hope it's better than my cooking. The article's final paragraphs had captured the spirit of transformation. Le Maison Rouge, once a symbol of exclusivity and discrimination, is being reborn. The new owner, James Cooper, promises a place where the only reservation requirement is treating others with respect. We're not lowering our standards, Cooper insists. We're raising them to include what really matters: dignity, kindness, and good food served with genuine hospitality. A knock at the office door revealed Mike, the security chief. "Sir, some of the fired staff are here for their meetings, including Antoine, and they're all dressed in work clothes." James smiled at the gesture. "Send them in. Let's see if they really understand what today taught them." The newspaper lay on his desk, its headline a testament to how quickly things can change. In just 2 days, he had gone from being the farmer they laughed at to the owner they hoped would give them a second chance. But more importantly, he had shown that true class had nothing to do with clothes or money. It was about how you treated people when you thought you had the power to judge them. "Should I stay?" Amy asked, watching the former staff members filing in, their designer clothes replaced by simple attire, their expressions humble. "Yes," James said. "They need to apologize to you too. After all, this whole thing started because they ruined your graduation dinner." He picked up the blank recommendation letters. "Let's see if they've learned what your mother always taught us, that real respect isn't about how people look, but who they choose to be." The new mission statement hung in the restaurant's entryway, engraved on a simple wooden plaque. At Le Maison Rouge, we believe that good food and genuine hospitality belong to everyone. Our ingredients come from the earth without prejudice. Our welcome extends to all who enter, and our measure of success is the dignity with which we treat each guest. Founded in tradition, rooted in respect, growing toward a better future. The first dinner service under new management was about to begin. James stood in the kitchen, watching Maria direct her team with quiet confidence. The menu had been completely revamped, still featuring French cuisine, but with a farm-to-table philosophy that honored both tradition and accessibility. "First seating is full," the new maître d' Sarah reported. "And you won't believe who's here." Through the kitchen window, James could see Antoine and 3 other former staff members being seated. They had come dressed simply, some in jeans and clean work shirts, clearly embracing the lesson they'd been taught. Their afternoon meetings had been revealing. Genuine remorse, stories of pressure from Laurent to maintain an exclusive atmosphere, and a desire to learn from their mistakes. "Treat them like any other guests," James instructed. "That's the whole point." The kitchen hummed with activity as the first orders came in. Maria had hired back 2 of the original line cooks who had shown no history of discrimination, and their familiarity with the kitchen helped steady the new team. The menu prices had been adjusted, still upscale but not extortionate. Quality without pretension. "Table 4 wants to meet you," Amy said, poking her head into the kitchen. She was helping out as a hostess for the opening night. "It's Mrs. Chen from the alteration shop, the one from the newspaper article." James found Mrs. Chen beaming at her table, surrounded by family. "Mr. Cooper," she said, taking his hands in hers, "you've done what many of us dreamed of, but never thought possible. You've made this place belong to everyone." At the bar, a farmer still in his field clothes sat next to a businessman in an expensive suit, both enjoying the same carefully crafted cocktails. The new bartender, a young woman who had worked her way up from dive bars, treated them with identical warmth and respect. "Chef wants you to see this," Amy called, waving him back to the kitchen. Maria had prepared the first farmer's special, a rustic coq au vin made with locally raised chickens and vegetables from Cooper Farm. The presentation was elegant but unpretentious, like a beloved family recipe dressed up for a special occasion. "It's perfect," James said, recognizing how the dish embodied everything they were trying to achieve. Excellence without exclusion, tradition without snobbery. Sarah appeared with another update. Antoine asked if he could speak with you when you have a moment. He's been watching how we operate, taking notes. Says he wants to learn how to do hospitality right this time. James nodded. Tell him I'll stop by his table later. Let him experience the service first. Understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of genuine respect. The evening progressed smoothly. The new staff working together as if they'd been a team for years. The kitchen sent out plate after plate of beautifully prepared food. The dining room buzzed with comfortable conversation, no one feeling out of place or unwelcome. Near closing time, James stood in the center of the restaurant, taking in the scene. The old crystal chandeliers now illuminated a truly diverse crowd. The expensive tablecloths hosted elbows both suited and worn. The carefully curated wine list was enjoyed by connoisseurs and casual drinkers alike. Dad, Amy said softly, joining him. Look what Sarah found in the reservation book. It was a note from a guest. First time I've felt truly welcome in a fine dining restaurant. Thank you for showing that class isn't about what you wear or how much money you have. It's about how you treat people. James tucked the note into his pocket, next to the deed that had made all this possible. The restaurant was more than just a business now. It was becoming a symbol of change, a place where the artificial barriers between people could dissolve over good food and genuine hospitality. Your mother would be proud, he told Amy, not because we got revenge, but because we turned it into something better. Outside, the restaurant's lights glowed warmly in the evening darkness, beckoning to anyone who wanted to experience what fine dining could be when stripped of prejudice and pretension. The sign still read Le Maison Rouge, but its promise was entirely new. Not just a meal, but a place at the table for everyone. The anonymous letters started arriving a week after the reopening. They were typed on expensive paper, each one more vitriolic than the last. James spread them across his desk, reading snippets aloud to Tom. You've destroyed a local institution. The restaurant has lost all standards. This used to be somewhere special. Now it's no better than a diner. James shook his head. This one's my favorite. A farmer has no business running a fine dining establishment. The complaints weren't limited to letters. Local food critics, previously in Laurent's pocket, published scathing reviews without even dining at the restaurant. Wealthy regulars launched a whisper campaign, suggesting the food quality had plummeted, despite Maria's kitchen maintaining and even exceeding previous standards. They're organizing a boycott, Amy reported, showing James a private social media group someone had leaked to her. The old money crowd is pressuring people not to dine here. They're saying we've lowered the tone of the whole neighborhood. James picked up another letter, this one threatening to contact the health department with fabricated violations. They're not just angry about losing their exclusive restaurant, he observed. They're afraid this idea will spread. His prediction was proving true. Other high-end restaurants in town were facing increasing scrutiny over their admission policies. Customers were beginning to question dress codes and reservation policies that seemed to vary based on appearance. The ripple effect was making the local elite uncomfortable. Mr. Cooper? Sarah knocked on the office door. The Chronicle's restaurant critic is here. He doesn't have a reservation, and he's wearing jeans and a work shirt. James smiled. Trying to test us, is he? Give him our best table. Same service we'd give anyone. But the challenges weren't just external. Some of the new staff were struggling with the pressure. One server quit after receiving harassment from former regular customers. The sommelier was fighting an uphill battle against wine distributors, who'd been loyal to Laurent and were now mysteriously out of stock of key vintages. We knew it wouldn't be easy, Tom reminded him. You're not just changing a restaurant, you're challenging a whole system. James picked up another complaint letter, this one comparing him to a bull in a china shop. Maybe that's not such a bad analogy. Sometimes things need to be broken before they can be fixed properly. The phone rang, another reporter wanting a statement about the controversy. James had become the center of a debate about class, culture, and who got to decide. what fine dining meant. Some called him a revolutionary, others a destroyer of traditions. "Dad," Amy entered with the evening's reservation list. "Remember Mrs. Chen? She's organized a group of local business owners. They're all coming for dinner tonight. Tailors, mechanics, shopkeepers. They're calling it a support real class night." Outside the window, a small group of protesters had gathered, former regulars holding signs about maintaining standards. But they were outnumbered by locals stopping to show support, some deliberately wearing work clothes to make a point. James watched a farmer in muddy boots shake hands with a teacher in casual dress, both waiting for tables. This was exactly what he'd wanted, a place where artificial barriers disappeared over good food and genuine hospitality. "Look at this," Amy said, showing him her phone. The latest Yelp reviews were pouring in, drowning out the orchestrated negative comments. "First time I've been able to celebrate my anniversary somewhere special without being made to feel unwelcome. The food is actually better now. Turns out good taste isn't about how much you spend on your clothes. Finally, a fine dining place that understands class isn't about excluding people." James gathered up the complaint letters, seeing them now for what they really were, the death throes of an outdated system. He pinned them to his office bulletin board as reminders of why their mission mattered. "Send a message to the staff," he told Amy. "Tell them I'm proud of how they're handling the pressure. And let's add something to tonight's menu, a new dessert called Sweet Success. Make it elegant but accessible, like everything else we do here." The protesters outside were leaving, defeated by the steady stream of diverse customers filling the restaurant. Through the kitchen window, James could see Maria teaching her team a new dish, her passion for food transcending all the artificial boundaries others tried to maintain. The last letter he picked up was unsigned, but different from the others. "You've made me question everything I believed about class and dignity. Thank you for showing us a better way." "That one," he framed. The colorful flyer posted throughout town read, "La Maison Rouge presents Community Table, where everyone belongs. Join us for our first monthly dinner celebrating local farmers, artisans, and neighbors. All are welcome. Dress as you are. Pay what you can." It was Amy's idea, inspired by the growing divide in the community. "If they want to talk about standards," she'd said, "let's show them our standard of bringing people together." The concept was simple but powerful. One Sunday each month, the restaurant would transform into a community gathering space. Local farmers, including James, would provide ingredients. Community members would share family recipes. The kitchen. Staff would turn these contributions into a menu that celebrated the town's diverse culinary heritage. "We've got quite a response," Sarah reported, showing James the reservation list. "Everyone from bank executives to farm workers. The Martinez family is sharing their grandmother's secret mole recipe, and the Chinese Cultural Center is sending someone to demonstrate dumpling making." James watched as Maria reorganized the kitchen to accommodate guest cooks. The traditional French cuisine would be complemented by dishes representing every corner of the community. The wine cellar, once a shrine to expensive labels, now included local wines and craft beverages. "Mr. Cooper," a familiar voice made him turn. Antoine stood there, not as a former employee seeking redemption, but as a participant. "I'd like to contribute my mother's ratatouille recipe. It's not fancy, but it's honest food, like you taught us to be." The preparation for the first community table dinner brought unexpected alliances. The same protesters who had picketed the restaurant weeks earlier were now curiosity seekers, drawn in by the sounds and smells of genuine community. Mrs. Chen had set up a demonstration station showing how to properly fold dumplings. Next to her, a former regular customer in expensive clothes, awkwardly but enthusiastically, tried to master the technique. They were laughing together, the barriers between them dissolving in the simple act of creating food. "Look at this," Amy said, pointing to the growing crowd. A local mechanic was discussing wine with a bank president. A farmhand was teaching. A real estate developer's wife, how to tell when tomatoes were perfectly ripe. The restaurant had become what James had always envisioned, a place where food brought people together instead of keeping them apart. The evening's centerpiece was a massive harvest table, built by local craftsmen, stretching through the dining room. No assigned seating, no VIP section, just people sharing space and breaking bread together. We've started something, haven't we? Amy asked, watching the room fill with conversation and laughter. James nodded, thinking of how far they'd come from that night of humiliation. Your mother used to say that the best revenge is proving people wrong about who you are, but maybe it's really about helping them become better than they thought they could be. The local newspaper's food critic, who had been so skeptical of the changes, was sitting with a farmer's family, deeply engaged in a discussion about sustainable agriculture. The sommelier who had initially struggled was teaching an enthusiastic group about affordable wine appreciation. As the evening progressed, James overheard snippets of conversation that told him their experiment was working. I've lived here 30 years and never really met my neighbors until now. Who knew the guy who fixes my car knew so much about mushroom foraging? Can you believe we used to think this place wasn't for people like us? The flyer had promised that all were welcome, and the community had responded by creating something greater than just a dinner. They'd created a model for what inclusive fine dining could be, where the fine came from the quality of both the food and the humanity it served. Next month's already fully booked, Sarah announced, and 3 other restaurants in town want to start similar programs. James watched as the evening wound down, seeing former adversaries exchanging phone numbers, making plans to collaborate on future events. The revolution they'd started wasn't just about food or service, it was about recognizing that true hospitality knew no boundaries. The flyer had done more than advertise an event. It had declared a new way forward. In challenging what fine dining could be, they had revealed what community could become. The letters began arriving 3 months after the change in management, each one handwritten, each telling a story of reflection and regret. James kept them in a folder labeled Second Chances, reading each one carefully as former staff members sought to make amends. Antoine's letter was the most detailed. When you fired us that day, I was angry, but then I watched how you treated us with the dignity we had denied you. It made me question everything. These past months, I've been working at a small cafe, learning to serve everyone equally. Each day, I remember how wrong we were and how much I want to make it right. Other letters followed, each revealing how the experience had changed them. I've spent these months working at a homeless shelter's kitchen, serving people we would have turned away. They've taught me more about dignity than all my years in fine dining. My daughter asked me why I lost my job. Having to explain to her that I was fired for being unkind, it changed something in me. Every time I see someone in work clothes enter a restaurant, I remember that night and feel ashamed. I want to learn to be better. James was reviewing these letters with Amy when Sarah knocked on the office door. They're here, she said softly. In the dining room, 5 former staff members stood nervously, dressed in casual clothes. Antoine, 2 servers, a sommelier, and a line cook. All had written letters, all had spent months proving their change of heart. Thank you for meeting with us, Antoine began, his former arrogance replaced by genuine humility. We've all been working in different places, learning what real hospitality means. James gestured for them to sit. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically from their last encounter, but this time he wasn't interested in wielding authority. He wanted to hear their stories. The sommelier spoke next. I've been teaching wine appreciation classes at the community center, not the pretentious tastings we used to do, but helping people discover wines they can actually afford and enjoy. One of the servers had tears in her eyes. Last week, a farmer came into the diner where I work now. All I could think about was how we would have treated him here. Instead, I gave him the best service I could, and he taught me about crop rotation over coffee. The line cook had spent his time working at a food bank. I realized food isn't about status, it's about bringing people together. That's what I lost sight of here. James listened to each story, seeing the genuine change in their eyes. These weren't the same people who had laughed at him months ago. They had taken their humiliation and turned it into humility, their shame into growth. "Why do you want to come back?" he asked finally. Antoine spoke for the group. "Not for the prestige. That means nothing now. We want to be part of what you've created here, a place that serves more than food, a place that serves humanity." James shared a look with Amy, who nodded slightly. They had discussed this possibility, knowing that true change sometimes required giving people the chance to prove they had learned from their mistakes. "There are conditions," James said. "You'll start at entry positions, working alongside the people you once looked down on. You'll train with our current staff, learning our way of doing things. And most importantly, you'll share your story with every new employee, how you learned that true class has nothing to do with clothes or money." The group nodded eagerly. The line cook spoke up. "We deserve to start at the bottom. We need to earn trust again." "One more thing," Amy added. "Each of you will help train our new apprentices, young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, who want to learn the restaurant business. Show them what you've learned about treating people right." As the group left, clutching their probationary contracts, James picked up another letter that had arrived that morning. This one was from Laurent himself, postmarked from France. Unlike the others, it was bitter, predicting the restaurant's failure without its exclusive atmosphere. "Should we respond?" Amy asked. James placed Laurent's letter in a different folder, one labeled Reminders. "No need," he said. "The best response is success. Besides, some people choose to learn from humility, while others just become more bitter." Through the office window, he watched Antoine being introduced to the new staff, his face eager to begin. Again, sometimes, James reflected, the most powerful part of revenge wasn't the punishment. It was giving people the chance to become better than they had been. The new staff photo hung prominently in the restaurant's entrance, replacing the old images of Laurent with celebrities. This picture told a different story. 40 people of varying ages, backgrounds and styles, all wearing their chosen work attire, from chef's whites to jeans and button-downs. At the center stood James and Amy, still in their farming clothes, surrounded by their transformed team. 6 months had passed since the takeover, and Le Maison Rouge had become something unprecedented in the fine dining world. The Michelin inspectors' recent review had noted, "A revolutionary approach that proves excellence and inclusivity can coexist. The food maintains the highest standards, while the atmosphere destroys artificial barriers." "Time for the morning meeting," Amy called out as staff gathered in the dining room. The pre-shift meetings had become a tradition, a time to share stories and reinforce their mission. Antoine, now working his way up from server to trainer, stood to speak. "Yesterday, a guest told me something interesting. He said he'd been afraid to come here in the old days, but now he brings his whole family. His daughter wants to be a chef because she sees Maria's kitchen team and realizes she can be anything." Maria nodded from her position near the kitchen doors. Her diverse kitchen staff had become known for innovation, combining classical French techniques with influences from their various backgrounds. The farmer's special had evolved into a daily celebration of local ingredients and global flavors. "Speaking of family," James said, "we have an announcement. Remember those apprenticeships?" "We started. Our first class is graduating next week. 3 of them have already been hired by other restaurants in town. Seems our approach is catching on." The staff broke into applause. Among them were several former employees who had earned their way back, each now mentoring newcomers about the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Sarah, the maitre d', shared the reservation list for the evening. It read like a cross-section of the community. Farmers celebrating a good harvest, teachers marking retirements, mechanics holding business meetings, bankers bringing their families. The wait list had grown so long they were planning to open for lunch service. But the best news, Amy added, is what's happening beyond our walls. 2 other high-end restaurants in town have dropped their dress codes. The steakhouse on 5th Street is partnering with local farms. The French bistro downtown just hired one of our apprentices as their new sous chef. James watched his team prepare for the day, seeing how naturally they worked together. The sommelier who had once refused to serve common wines was enthusiastically training a young woman from the farming community about wine pairings. A former street food vendor was teaching Antoine the perfect way to plate his grandmother's recipes. The photo seemed to capture all of this, not just faces, but a revolution in what fine dining could be. Each person in the image had a story. The single mother who'd become their best server, the retired teacher who hosted wine tastings, the former farmhand who discovered a talent for pastry. "Chef wants everyone to taste the new menu items," Maria announced. The staff gathered as she presented several dishes. Classic French cuisine reimagined through a lens of inclusivity and local ingredients. A coq au vin made with Cooper Farm chickens, a ratatouille featuring vegetables from community gardens, desserts that combined French technique with family recipes from around the world. "This is what we're about," James told the group. "Not just serving food, but showing that excellence doesn't have to be exclusive. Every person who walks through that door deserves our best, not because of what they wear or what they own, but because that's who we are." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the staff photo and making it glow. In it, they weren't just employees. They were pioneers, proving that revenge could transform into redemption, that exclusivity could become community, that fine dining could be both excellent and accessible. As the team dispersed to their stations, James heard Antoine teaching a new server the words that had become their unofficial motto: "The only standard that matters is how we treat each other." The photo watched over it all, a daily reminder of how far they'd come from that night of humiliation, and how sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. In the quiet of his office, James opened the leather-bound journal Sarah had given him years ago. He'd started writing in it the night of the restaurant incident, and now, 7 months later, he turned to a fresh page to reflect on everything that had changed. Looking back, I realized that night wasn't just about being kicked out of a restaurant. It was about a system that made people think it was okay to judge others based on appearances. When I bought this place, I thought I wanted revenge. What I really wanted was change. The oil money could have let me become just like them, exclusive, judgmental, looking down on others. Instead, it gave me the power to show there's a better way. Sarah always said true wealth isn't about what you have, but what you do with it. Today, I watched Antoine, the same maître d' who turned us away, teach our newest apprentice about making everyone feel welcome. The transformation in him, in all of them who came back, proves that people can change when shown a different path. Amy's thriving here. She's taken what she learned about agriculture and applied it to our farm-to-table program. The same determination that got her through college is now helping other young people find their path in the culinary world. The restaurant's success has surprised everyone, except those who understood what we were trying to do. Turns out there were a lot of people waiting for a place that would welcome them as they are. Our reservations are booked weeks in advance, but we always keep tables open for walk-ins. Never know when someone might need a special night out, regardless of what they're wearing. Maria's Kitchen has become a learning ground for fusion cuisine, French techniques, meeting family recipes from around the world. The food critics who predicted our downfall are now writing about the democratization of fine dining. Their fancy words just mean we're proving that excellent food and genuine hospitality belong to everyone. The other night, a farmer came in wearing his work boots, just like I had, but instead of judgment, he found respect. I watched him order confidently from our wine list, the one our inclusive-minded sommelier created. and enjoy a meal he'd helped create. Some of the vegetables came from his farm. Laurent sent another letter last week, still predicting our failure. I keep his letters as reminders of what we're fighting against. But more importantly, I keep the thank you notes from guests who never thought they could enjoy fine dining. Their words remind me that the best revenge against exclusivity is proving it unnecessary. Sarah would be proud of what we've created here. She always said that anger can destroy you or transform you. It's your choice. By choosing transformation, we've changed more than just a restaurant. We've changed minds, including our own. The soil beneath my boots might be worth millions now, but the real wealth is in the community we've built. Every time I see people from different walks of life sharing tables, every time I watch former antagonists working together in the kitchen, I know we've grown something more valuable than money could ever buy. Tomorrow, we're hosting a dinner for local farmers and suppliers. They'll sit alongside bank executives and city officials, all eating the same food, all treated with the same respect. That's the real revolution. Not in overthrowing the old system, but in creating a new one where it simply doesn't matter what you wear or where you come from. My father used to say that the measure of good soil isn't just what it's worth, but what it can grow. We're growing something new here, something that's spreading beyond our walls. Other restaurants are changing their policies. Other communities are asking how they can do the same. Looking back at that night of humiliation, I realize it wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Sometimes life's worst moments give you the opportunity to create something better, not just for yourself, but for everyone. And that's the greatest lesson in all of this. True class isn't about excluding others. It's about including everyone. Real standards aren't about what people wear, but how they treat each other. And the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making things better. The graduation photo captured a moment of pure joy. Amy in her cap and gown, standing between the restaurant's elegant entrance pillars, surrounded by both the original and new staff of Le Maison Rouge. Her diploma in one hand, a chef's knife in the other, gifts from two worlds that had finally merged. "Can't believe we're finally having my graduation dinner," Amy laughed, adjusting her graduation cap as the photographer took another shot. Only 7 months late, the restaurant had closed early for this private celebration. The tables were arranged in a giant U-shape, allowing everyone to see each other. The guest list was a testament to how much had changed. Farmers in their work clothes sat next to professors in academic robes, kitchen staff mingled with agricultural scientists, and former antagonists now chatted like old friends. Maria had outdone herself with the menu. Each course told part of Amy's story. An appetizer featuring vegetables from Cooper Farm, a main course that combined French technique with local ingredients, and a dessert inspired by Sarah's old recipes. "A toast," James announced, standing at the head of the table. "To my daughter, who didn't just graduate with honors in agricultural science, but helped create something even bigger, a place where everyone's welcome and success is measured by how we treat each other." The room erupted in applause. Antoine, now fully embracing his role in the transformed restaurant, stepped forward with a surprise. "Miss Cooper, the staff has a gift for you." He presented a leather-bound book. "We've collected stories and photos from the past 7 months. How your father's act of revenge became our lesson in humanity." Amy opened the book, tears welling in her eyes as she saw the documentation of their journey. There were newspaper clippings about the takeover, photos of the first community table dinner, letters from grateful customers, and testimonials from staff members whose lives had changed. Mrs. Chen stood up next, representing the local business community. "When you and your father were thrown out of here, we all felt the shame of it. Not just because of how you were treated, but because we had accepted such behavior as normal. You didn't just change a restaurant, you changed our whole community." The mayor, wearing a simple business suit rather than his usual formal attire, added his own toast. This establishment has become a model for our city. We're now implementing policies to ensure all businesses understand that discrimination has no place here. As the evening progressed, Amy moved from table to table, her graduation gown catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. She spoke with young apprentices about their dreams, shared agricultural insights with fellow farmers, and discussed future plans with restaurant staff. "Remember what Mom used to say about making lemonade from lemons?" she asked her father as they shared. A quiet moment. "We did better than that. We made a feast from what was meant to be bitter." James watched as Antoine expertly served guests of all backgrounds with equal grace, as Maria's kitchen team sent out plates that combined culinary excellence with accessibility, as former critics who'd predicted their failure now dined happily alongside the people they'd once looked down upon. "Your mother would be so proud," he told Amy, "not just of your degree, but of how you helped turn revenge into redemption." The celebration continued late into the night. Stories were shared, bridges were built, and plans were made. The apprentices presented Amy with a special dish they'd created in her honor, the graduate's garden, featuring ingredients from Cooper Farm arranged like a miniature graduation cap. As the evening wound down, someone called for a group photo. Everyone gathered around Amy and James, farmers, servers, chefs, community leaders, all standing together as equals. The photographer paused, looking through his lens at the unlikely family that had formed. "Now this," he said, "is what real class looks like." The final photo showed not just a graduation celebration, but the graduation of the restaurant itself, from a place of exclusion to one of unity, from revenge to redemption, from discrimination to dignity. Amy's academic achievement had become symbolic of a larger transformation, one that proved success could be measured in more than just dollars or social status. As the last guest departed, Amy remained in her cap and gown, standing in the same spot where she and her father had once been humiliated. But now the space held different memories of triumph, of community, of a revenge plot that had evolved into something far more meaningful than anyone could have imagined. 1 year later, the new menu told the whole story. Printed on recycled paper embedded with wildflower seeds, it began with a simple statement: "From our soil to your soul, a journey of food, family, and fellowship." James held the menu, remembering that night 1 year ago, when he and Amy had been judged unworthy of the previous version. Now, each dish represented a piece of their journey. The farmer's welcome, a starter featuring seasonal vegetables from Cooper Farm, served with the same dignity that had transformed the restaurant. Community table classics, a rotating selection of dishes inspired by local families' recipes, each credited to its original creator. Antoine's redemption, a French onion soup that the former maître d' had learned from his grandmother, now served to everyone, regardless of their attire. The graduate's garden, Amy's signature dish, combining her agricultural expertise with Maria's culinary artistry. La Maison Rouge had become more than just a successful restaurant. It was a blueprint for change. Food magazines wrote about the Cooper revolution in fine dining. Other restaurants across the country sought their advice on creating inclusive, yet excellent experiences. The oil wells on Cooper Farm were producing well, but James found greater satisfaction in the other things growing there: new greenhouses supplying the restaurant, training programs for aspiring farmers, and a sense of purpose that no amount of money could buy. "Table 7 wants to meet you," Amy called from the dining room. "You'll want to see this." At the table sat Laurent, his designer clothes slightly worn, his manner subdued. Next to him sat his teenage daughter, her eyes bright with interest, as she studied the kitchen operations. "Mr. Cooper," Laurent said, standing, "my daughter insisted we come. She wants to apply for your apprenticeship program." James saw the humility in Laurent's eyes, the recognition of how much he had lost by clinging to old prejudices. "We evaluate all applicants equally," James replied. The only requirements are a willingness to work hard and treat everyone with respect. Laurent's daughter beamed. That's what I love about this place. It's still fancy and the food's amazing, but nobody makes you feel like you don't belong. After they left, James toured the busy restaurant. Antoine was training a new server, emphasizing how to make every guest feel valued. Maria's kitchen was a symphony of cooperation, with cooks from different backgrounds sharing techniques and traditions. The sommelier was teaching a wine class where construction workers and corporate executives learned side by side. The farm's original deed still hung on the office wall, but now it had company. Photos of community events, letters of thanks, and the graduation picture that captured their triumph. Next to his desk stood a frame containing the muddy boots he'd worn that fateful night, a reminder of where they'd started. Amy entered with the latest news. 3 more restaurants in town had adopted their inclusive approach. The mayor was considering a city-wide initiative based on their model. The waiting list for their apprenticeship program had grown to over 100 applicants. "Did you ever think," she asked, "that getting kicked out of a restaurant would lead to all this?" James looked out at the dining room, where farmers sat alongside financiers, where work boots were as welcome as designer shoes, where the food was excellent and the only standard that mattered was how people treated each other. "Your mother once told me that success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right." We did both. The evening sun cast a warm glow through the windows, illuminating the new sign they'd added below the restaurant's name. "All are welcome here." In the kitchen, the staff was preparing for dinner service, each dish a testament to how far they'd come from that night of humiliation. The menu in James's hands wasn't just a list of dishes. It was proof that revenge, when transformed by wisdom and grace, could become something far more powerful, a legacy of positive change. "Time for the evening briefing," Amy reminded him. James nodded, ready to share once again the story that had become their foundation. Not just about a farmer who bought a restaurant to get even, but about a community that learned to rise above prejudice, about people who found the courage to change, and about how the finest things in life had nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with character. The restaurant was full, the kitchen was humming, and the future was as rich as the soil that had started it all. Sometimes, James reflected, the best revenge isn't serving a cold dish, it's serving a better world.